I've always been a bit of a loner, preferring the company of a good book to that of people. But after my friend's incessant nagging, I decided to give Tinder a try. I thought, what's the worst that could happen? Little did I know I was about to find out. I matched with a woman named Olivia. She was beautiful, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We chatted for a few days, and I was smitten. She suggested we meet at a local coffee shop, and I agreed. The day of our date, I arrived early, nervously sipping my coffee as I waited for her. When she walked in, I was taken aback. She was even more beautiful in person. We hit it off immediately, talking about everything from our favorite books to our shared love of hiking. After a few more dates, things started to get serious. She invited me over to her place for dinner. I was excited but also a bit nervous. I had never been to a woman's house on a date before. When I arrived, she greeted me with a warm smile and led me into her apartment. It was cozy and well decorated. She had cooked a delicious meal, and we spent the evening talking and laughing. But as the night wore on, I started to notice something strange. She would occasionally glance at her phone, her expression turning serious. I asked her if everything was okay, and she assured me it was. As I was leaving, I discovered a piece of paper on her coffee table. It was a printout of my Tinder profile. What the hell? Why would she print out my profile? After a few weeks of dating Olivia, things took a turn for the worse. One night I was at home trying to unwind after a long day at work. Suddenly I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole. To my surprise, it was Olivia. She was standing there, her face pale and her eyes wide. She was knocking incessantly, her knuckles turning white from the force. I didn't open the door. Instead, I retreated to the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I heard a tapping sound. I turned around and saw her at my window, her face pressed against the glass. She was mouthing something, but I couldn't make out the words. I was frozen in fear. I noticed a van parked across the street. It was a nondescript white van, the kind you see in movies. I couldn't see who was inside, but I had a sinking feeling that it was connected to Olivia. I called the police and they arrived shortly after. They found Olivia still outside my house and they arrested her. The van was gone by the time they arrived. In the following days, I couldn't help but reflect on what had happened. I realized that Olivia's behavior was not just obsessive, but potentially dangerous. The van, her presence outside my house, her knowledge of my personal information, it all pointed to a sinister plan. I couldn't help but think about what could have happened if I hadn't noticed the signs. What if I had opened the door that night? What if I had ignored the van? I shuddered at the thought. I realized that she might not have been working alone. The van suggested that there were others involved. Were they planning to abduct me? To harm me in some way? The possibilities were terrifying. This experience has made me rethink not just online dating, but also the importance of personal safety. I've learned to trust my instincts, to pay attention to the red flags, and to take action when something doesn't feel right. I've also learned that it's important to share these experiences, to raise awareness about the potential dangers of online dating. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new relationship, but it's crucial to stay vigilant. Remember, it's always better to be safe than sorry. Trust your instincts and don't be afraid to take action if something feels off. It was a typical Friday night. I was swiping through Tinder looking for someone interesting. Suddenly a profile caught my eye. Her name was Alice, and she was stunning. We matched and soon we were deep in conversation. She was witty, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in me. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet in person. On the day of the date, I was excited, but also cautious. I had heard stories about people being catfished on Tinder, so I decided to meet Alice in a public place. We agreed to meet at a local coffee shop. When I arrived, I saw a woman sitting alone. She looked nothing like Alice. I approached her and she introduced herself as Alice. My heart sank. I had been catfished. As I walked to my car, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. It had been there when I arrived. I got into my car and started to drive away. The sedan followed. Panic set in. I tried to lose them, taking random turns, but they stayed right behind me. I called the police and explained the situation. They told me to keep driving and that they were on their way. The chase continued for what felt like hours. The sedan was relentless, matching my every move. The streets were deserted, and the only sounds were the roar of our engines and the occasional screech of tires. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced in the rearview mirror, the headlights of the sedan a constant presence. I tried everything to shake them off. I sped up, slowed down, and took sharp turns, but nothing worked. They were always right behind me, their car a menacing shadow in the night. I could see the silhouettes of the men in the car, their faces obscured by the darkness. Finally, I saw flashing lights in my rearview mirror. The police had arrived. They pulled over the sedan, and I watched as two men were arrested. It turned out they were known for luring people through dating apps and robbing them. Alice was part of their scheme. The men were charged with robbery, conspiracy, and stalking. They were found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Alice was also arrested and charged with conspiracy and identity theft. She was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years in prison. I was relieved, but also shaken. I couldn't help but reflect on what could have happened if I hadn't been so cautious. I could have been robbed or worse. From then on, I was more careful. I realized that while apps like Tinder can be a great way to meet people, they can also be a hunting ground for predators. I learned to always meet in public places, tell someone where I'm going, and trust my instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. This experience was a wake-up call. It taught me the importance of caution and vigilance in the digital age. It's easy to forget that behind the screen is a real person with real intentions, which may not always be good. But with awareness and caution, it's possible to navigate the world of online dating safely. And who knows, you might just find what you're looking for. I've always been a bit of a romantic, always hoping to find that special someone. So, when my friends suggested I try out Tinder, I thought, why not? After a few days of swiping left and right, I matched with a man named Alex. He seemed charming, funny, and shared my love for vintage films. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up at a local park in the evening. The day of the date, I was a bundle of nerves. I put on my favorite dress, applied a touch of makeup, and drove to the park. I arrived at our agreed meeting spot, a quaint little bench overlooking a pond. As I sat there waiting, the cool evening breeze gently tugging at my dress, I began to hear an unsettling sound. It started as a soft rustling, like leaves being disturbed, coming from the forest nearby. I strained my eyes, peering into the growing darkness, but saw no one. The rustling grew louder, morphing into the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. My heart pounded in my chest like a wild drum, the rhythm echoing in my ears. I quickly pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Alex's number. I held my breath, hoping against hope that this was just a poorly thought-out prank. But what happened next sent a wave of horror washing over me. From the direction of the forest, I heard a phone ringing. It was a haunting sound, muffled by the trees, but unmistakably Alex's ringtone. My blood ran cold. I was alone in a park, the silence broken only by the sound of a phone ringing from the forest. Panic surged through me like a tidal wave, drowning out all rational thought. I ended the call, my fingers barely able to hit the button. I quickly stood up, my eyes darting around the park, every shadow seeming to hide a potential threat. I started to walk briskly towards my car, my heels clicking against the pavement. The phone in the forest stopped ringing, only to be replaced by the sound of footsteps. They were getting closer. I broke into a run, my heart pounding in my ears. I fumbled with my keys as I reached my car, glancing over my shoulder. The park was empty, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I unlocked my car, jumped in, and locked the doors. I started the engine and drove off, leaving the park and its eerie sounds behind. Once I was safely home, I reported the incident to the police. They searched the park but found no one. They suggested it might have been a prank, but I knew better. I deleted Tinder that night, vowing to stick to traditional dating. I couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if I had stayed in the park that night. If I had ventured into the forest, following the sound of the ringing phone. Would I have found Alex there, laughing at his own joke? Or would I have stumbled upon something far more dangerous? A trap laid by someone who was not the charming man he had pretended to be on Tinder. If Alex really was who he claimed to be, we might have shared a laugh about the whole situation later. He would have apologized for his ill-conceived prank, and maybe we would have gone out for a cup of coffee, talking late into the night about our favorite vintage films. Perhaps we would have found a connection, a spark that could have turned into something more. But in the end, no date is worth risking your life for.